really focus on the solution part, and make that not just be a poster in class, but to actually really try to challenge and think about how we can implement the solutions. My name is Beth Kassler, and I teach at Margaret Kemp Girls Camp, which is a small therapeutic facility within the San Mateo County Court Schools. And I teach science and math and have been here 8 years. And I'm fortunate in that we have a pretty flexible program and have a big garden. And I've been interested in environmental education my whole teaching career. Well, the fellowship was so super valuable to me because I spent a ton of time creating curriculum and finding curriculum and kind of assembling it and trying to get good resources. And in the fellowships, I've done a few now. The wealth of resources that we're exposed to and have access to is awesome, and it's just really helped me as an educator. I think the biggest change was the introduction to the solutionary thinking in general, and to really focus on the solution part, and make that not just be a poster in class, but to actually really try to challenge and think about how we can implement the solutions. And I like the idea. I mean, in terms of what's a challenge, it is a challenge to try to implement the changes. In the facility I work at, students don't, they're pretty limited with their choice, and they're not even living at home right now. So they don't have direct access to their families. And so sometimes it seems like we get stuck in talking about things, but we have done a few things with the Zero Waste Fellowship. We did kind of waste audits here and started to try to reduce our waste that we're using here on campus. We have a composting program here at school in our garden that we do. I pretty much just kind of I'm looking at all my curriculum now and just feeling like, how can I put the solutionary framework on it? And it makes me want to ditch everything that I've used in the past. That's a challenge that realistically I can't. But it's inspired me a lot, and kind of 20 years into my teaching career, it's reminded me how much there is still to do. So that's been cool. It still is it still feels tricky and figuring out the timing, because the problems are so extensive, and to really educate about the problems in the amount of time it takes to do that, but then to make sure I'm leaving equal amount of time to investigate the solution part. I mean, something I'd love to do in time is find ways for my students to actually be in the community, or having a more direct exposure to internships and different things where they could be part of some of these solutions or positive practices out in their communities. That will take a little time to develop, but that I would love to be able to do, because at the high school age, they're pretty jaded already, and understandably so. But yeah, trying to work on chipping away at that. I think it was Herbert Cole, the author, who said this at some point, but just because things are the way they are doesn't mean they need to continue being that way. I'm not quoting it quite right, but it's really influenced me for a long time in my teaching, that to try to teach from that lens, that things could be and are pretty dim in a lot of areas, but that remembering that they weren't always this way, and examining cases of history where people have made changes. So I try to kind of keep looking for those stories and looking for those examples, especially with young people. I know last spring when we were still in person, no, in the summer, we were in person briefly before we went remote again. And it was shortly after George Floyd was killed and all the protesting was still happening. And, so we made posters for all over campus, and we were looking at, we were comparing the protest movement to the Standing Rock water rights movement. And I think when students see other people, my students in particular, they're mad about a lot of things. They've experienced injustice firsthand. And I think it can be empowering to see other people that are also angry about injustice, but they're channeling it in a way that's trying to bring about change. And I guess then on another piece that's, not about anger, but just trying to be restorative, is the time we spend in the garden and nature journaling, and just, creating spaces of beauty more and more. We're spending more and more time outside. And so, and then to be able to touch back on that, that when we are looking at climate change and, the impact, for example, of industrial agriculture on the climate, and then when you get to talking about the solutions, and one of the big solutions being like growing your own food and growing local, buying local, all of that, and being able to point to, and talk with the students, like, that's what we're doing here. And like, you guys are learning how to do this. And it's something I have a student leaving tomorrow, and she's bringing her little like seedlings of cilantro and kale. And she's asking me, asking me tons of questions, giving her a growing calendar, and so that, she's just like, I'm going to grow all my own food. And she's kind of fired up about it. So stuff like that, gives me a little bit of hope when I see them kind of latch on to some of that. I know gardening for me all these years, and just plants, and like literally just watching and taking care of something and seeing it grow. Some of them, not all, but some of them have definitely seemed like it's brought them joy too. And I hope that can be sort of like, a protective factor for all the heaviness that we're also still working with. I'm hoping this summer, and now I'm kind of moving into sustainable food unit. And the big solution that we'll be looking at with this will be, reducing food waste and composting. We'll be probably doing some about eating more plant-based diet. So I think there can be some sort of like education, and I think the students will be kind of on board with that. Again, tricky because they don't have access to control what they eat here. It's really hard to say. Like, I know I want to do like pause more periodically for some like reflection, and to try to capture what is really changing. I think there's definitely in the time since I've been teaching, there's just like a blanket awareness and acknowledgement that the environment's in trouble. I mean, that's something I've seen as a change from 20 years ago. Sustainable food has been we were working on a little bit this last quarter, and we're going to continue during summer school. So yeah, but I can imagine the next one I want to sort of create will be sort of around oceans and or sustainable water. Well, probably I might do oceans, even though that wasn't exactly one of the fellowships, but I guess that's just it, like from what the amount of resources that are provided during the fellowships, and it's all, accessible to us online. Now that I've done it a couple of times, I feel like I can also use the resources and pool things, and, in time, reach out to all the thousands of community partners that we've been connected to, to keep building up different units. But that's definitely a goal. Like in my mind, I'm thinking of doing kind of 2 explicit solutionary units, kind of ecological solutionary units each school year. And then rotating them out, climate change, zero waste, oceans, probably like ecosystems and biodiversity, like do 2 of those each year and kind of mix it up. Because sometimes I have students for more than 1 year. So I try to have, fresh curriculum for them. So I just, when I was starting to kind of go through a bunch of things that were on my desk, I had, a printout of, I think it was like how to be a solutionary leader or something like that. It was, big giant PDF that I had printed out. And I know in the book that we were given, the world is what we teach or something like that, that there was like this integrated example looking at, this dead zone in the Gulf and how it linked back to, high rates of heart disease. And I teach also a lot of sort of biology, anatomy. That's another sort of medical biology stuff. That's been like a interest and an interest of a lot of my students. And I'd love to work to make more connections between like our diabetes and heart disease units and looking at food insecurity and health disparities and linking that to like how we grow food connect to people's health outcomes, and again noticing where there's disparities and how it is really connected. So that's like a big thing that I'm thinking about. But yeah, as I said before, I want to make sure that I like look for and find ways that will be like interesting, engaging for the students to really think about the solutions. And ideally like that we can enact those solutions here on campus. I would absolutely say do it. Every teacher knows that we go to thousands of meetings that don't help us and feel like a waste of our time. But this was so professionally done, so respectful of our time. You'll walk away with such a wealth of material and support, like phenomenal curriculum. It'll save you hours and hours and hours. So absolutely do it. And it's also inspiring, especially if you've been teaching for a while. You got to keep the inspiration going. And that I really felt fueled and motivated each institute I did.